Okay, looks like we are going. I'm going to get everything sunk up and then let's dive into WTF is this awakening about? Okay. We are going. I'm going to get everything sunk up and then hold on. Let's dive into W. There we go. All right. Still playing with how to deliver all of these messages on all of these platforms and systems and ever evolving and process of learning. So, what the actual F is this awakening about? This is something that is often thrown out there. We hear about this whole concept of an awakening. The collective is awakening. I'm going through an awakening process. Yet, what is this whole awakening process about? And how is it that we can best navigate through it? Well, I mean, it's a really relevant question because when we talk about things in terms of this whole concept of an awakening, it brings, at least to my mind, well, am I sleeping? Like, if I'm awakening, if all of us are awakening, then where am I sleeping? And what does that even begin to mean? I feel like that's a really great place to start. And so, one thing in terms of the awakening process is that we are largely unaware of something. And that is what I would say is the whole concept of us sleeping. Back in college days, I had gone from my freshman year, which was way back when in 1997. I came in I was pretty fit. I had spent a summer paddling. I had spent an entire summer bodyboarding, and I came in at about 195. And at that time was, pretty fit, pretty healthy overall. And yet in that 4-year period, I had gone from, like 195. I was probably like a 34 waist, pretty built overall because I was doing a lot of paddling and a lot of bodyboarding and surfing. And then by the end of that, when I graduated May 2001, I had ballooned up, to say the least, and had graduated at about 250 pounds. That was about a size 40 waist, not at all in any kind of really healthy condition, with all these maladapted, coping mechanisms and strategies. Had really been probably I would like to say the most unfit. However, a year later, after doing things in therapeutic foster care and whatnot, had gotten even a little bit bigger, even a little less healthy. And so as I went through that whole process, my sleeping, the area I was unaware of, was my own health. It was an area that I really wasn't very attentive to, let alone was I doing jack about. And so then I went to Okinawa in 2002. And in that period had lost a very important person in my life, who was my Uncle Dave. And so in our family, we had different health considerations. And for me, the awakening process was spurred by coming into some very real truths in terms of not just my own health, what that would look like if I continued on that process already at, way above, about 55, 60 pounds above my normal or average weight, and how that could affect my health long term. And so what woke me up was actually his passing, because a lot of things came into that whole process then, an abrupt shift in terms of my world, as well as my worldview, which was largely around health and well-being, as well as then realizing I had some choices to make. And those choices could be the same old things I had chosen before: eating late at night, eating crap pizza and hot dogs and burgers and fries without any kind of abandonment. And it could also go into a different direction, taking more responsibility for my health, which I ended up doing, and being able to make my own food and to do it in a way that is more conscientious, and to apply things like walking daily and working out regularly to not just the choices that I made here and there, but really a way that could become a lifestyle. And as I did, I found out that I felt really good. Indeed, I felt great participating in different sports and doing different activities, and found that I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed movement. I really enjoyed exercise. I really enjoyed participating in my health and well-being and applying things not just from sheer exercise, also breathing and meditation. And as I made this, the emergence of this aspect of myself, part of my everyday life and practice, I created a discipline around it to this point now where I am today. Well, oh man, over 20 years later, just about 20 years later, I don't really need to think about it. It's just something that I do. Prioritizing my sleep and my health and my own vitality is just part of my everyday life. And it wasn't for a long period. And that basically is everything from the beginning to the end, if you will, though there's really no end, of an awakening. That sleeping is being unaware. If you think about closing your eyes and lying down, we're not really attentive to what's happening around us. We're also not very conscious of what's happening within. And that is us sleeping. We don't know what's going on. Then what we awaken to, very much like an alarm clock, can be something. Oh, hold on. One moment. Oops. Okay. And so what then we are awakening to is the ability to then come into a new place. And that is the initiation process. The initiation process is when something happens, usually abruptly. It's not like it just happened. It's been building for a while. Something abruptly changes, and that brings our attention to the fact that we're sleeping to begin with. And very much like an alarm clock, though, we can hit that snooze button again and again and again, which keeps us in that first stage of our initiations. Now, when that happens, then we begin to see a pattern, and this pattern is of the past, and these patterns of the past in this stage of our awakening, then we realize have no place in our present. Me and applying these coping strategies on emotional eating and really not just taking care of myself, then I came to realize that that wasn't something that was going to work for me. Now, as that happens, then as I acknowledge that, then I realize there are choices to make. Stage 2 of an awakening is all about the reckoning. And what this is this means that now, as I realize there are decisions to make, there's also a responsibility to take. The responsibility that I took was that I have been making these choices, which is why I've ballooned up and gained, 60 pounds of weight. And I have decisions to make to live a healthier life. And once that happens, then I have more responsibility to take on making my own food, deciding to live a lifestyle of movement, to be able to walk and to participate in my own health. As this happens, it takes us then into stage 3, the emergence, where we experience ourselves differently, new qualities and characteristics of this person that we are becoming. Place of high uncertainty, yet we are able to experience ourselves in a new and often renewing way. Now, when we continue to choose in on that, we move into the last stage, the assimilation, which is really a discipline of these characteristics, where we actually put this into a practice of our presence. And what that means is that I would have to make it a priority to go to the gym 3 times a week. I had to make it a priority to walk to work rather than to drive. I had to make it a priority and time to cook my own meals rather than just picking up what was convenient. And so as all these parts come into play, what we're doing is we're going from a place of our ego, sort of this identity that we've created, and we're moving into our essence. And that's a sliding scale, one of which we can slingshot back into our ego. And ego is not bad. It's by no means negative, though there are consequences to it. It's an identity that we've created to survive in our lives, often dependent upon other people and positions and titles, whereas our essence is just the being that we are. And that being that we are is beautiful and is amazing and is loving and is a version of us that is pure and beautiful and connected. And now, as we look at that, then this whole awakening process is basically that we are moving into our essence. And at any point can slingshot not just from ego and into essence, also in any one of those 4 stages, the initiation, the reckoning, the emergence, and the assimilation phase, back into stage 1, where we are thrown back into these patterns of the past, and we choose to perpetuate them because it is a choice, and realize that it doesn't work for us. So as we go through all of this, it can be very disruptive, especially in that initiation phase, because we have things that just don't seem to work. These things that don't seem to work is because we're approaching our lives using information, a version, if you will, of us that no longer is relevant, and as that happens, then what we really want to be able to do is have the audacity to believe in ourselves, to be able to acknowledge what these choices are that we have made and are continuing to make, and where the opportunity in all of that is, because at any given point, me choosing to eat pizza at 1 a.m. in the morning, an entire large on my own, that's not good. I mean, there's nothing good about that. There's nothing good about that. It's not something that is positive for my health, for my well-being, especially not for my body. So there was a choice to make. Okay, well, maybe I not eat an entire pizza, right, on my own at 1 o'clock in the morning. I may still have some pizza. However, that's a start. And as it continues to change, maybe I won't have pizza. Maybe I'll have a granola bar. Maybe I won't be eating so late. Maybe I will not be up at that time. All of these things begin to change. And as we do, we find ourselves in new, sometimes uncharted territories in our lives. And that is ultimately a good thing. If we're in a place of uncertainty, then it's a place that we may not be familiar with. Hell, we may have never been in that position in the first place. And so as we go through all that, though, it is something that is ongoing, because there's so many aspects to ourselves, whether we talk about social awareness, wealth consciousness, our own health, professional, personal, all these pieces. And so as we are ever and always in an awakening process, it's ongoing. It's something that continues to happen for us. And it does happen for us, even though it does happen through us. And it's something that as we continue to go through this process, it's something that ultimately gets us closer and closer to home. The essence of who we are, the authentic version of who we are becoming, and the person and being that we have always been. Okay, I feel like that's probably a good introduction for now. I got to hele and head on out. That's it for now. Love and aloha. Take care and ahui ho.